Ooh. Whoa, that certainly is.
For years, Tony Beets' massive old dredge has been one of the most mysterious and controversial machines on Gold Rush. Fans have always wondered why Tony refuses to scrap it, why he keeps sinking money into a relic that barely runs, and why he gets strangely defensive whenever anyone brings it up. But just moments ago, several of his own workers finally broke their silence, and what they revealed about what Tony hid inside that dredge is nothing short of explosive. According to them, the dredge wasn't just an old mining machine, it was hiding something Tony never wanted the cameras to see, something he kept locked away, ignored by the show, and buried under rust, mud, and metal for years. And now that it's been exposed, the truth is spreading fast, and it's bad. Very bad. What exactly did they find? Why did Tony keep it hidden for so long? And how will this change everything for the Beets family operation? The answers are more shocking than anyone expected. For more than a decade, the towering metal beast known as Tony Beets' old dredge has loomed over the Klondike, like a ghost from another era. It's massive, rusted, unpredictable, and so expensive to maintain that most miners would rather blow it up than try to keep it alive. But not Tony Beets. He guarded that dredge with an intensity that even his crew didn't fully understand. He spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fixing it, moving it, rebuilding sections of it, yet he refused to let anyone explore certain parts of the machine. Even the Gold Rush production crew wasn't allowed full access. Tony would simply wave them off with a grin and say, "Don't worry about that part." But this season, everything changed. It all started when a section of the dredge's lower interior completely collapsed. The damage was so severe that Tony had no choice but to send a few trusted workers inside to inspect the structure. Cameras weren't rolling. Tony himself was off location dealing with equipment breakdowns. And deep inside the dredge, covered in dust, oil, and years of untouched grime, the workers found something that stopped them cold. One of them later said, "I knew right away Tony didn't want anyone to see this." Inside a sealed compartment blocked off by welded metal plates, the workers discovered a cache of old documents, equipment, and a set of items that didn't belong to the Beets family at all. These weren't simple spare parts or forgotten tools. They were objects connected to the dredges, original owners' items tied to mining operations that took place long before Tony ever set foot in the Klondike. And that wasn't even the shocking part. Buried under a pile of vintage gear was a locked metal chest, rusted around the hinges but suspiciously well hidden. The workers initially thought it was scrap until they realized Tony had welded steel beams around it, making it nearly impossible to remove without heavy tools. Why would Tony seal a chest inside the dredge? Why hide it so deep that even his own mechanics didn't know it existed? Curiosity took over. The workers pried it open, and what they found inside was the beginning of the firestorm. Inside the chest were old mining permits and maps from a company that operated illegally in the 19 for handwritten ledgers listing undocumented gold extractions, photographs showing the dredge being used in restricted land zones, and most startling, a set of letters suggesting the dredge was part of a dispute that ended in a decades-old investigation. None of this matched the story Tony had always told about the dredge being a legendary piece of mining history revived out of pure passion. The documents told a darker, messier truth about its past. When Tony returned to the site, the workers showed him what they had found, and for the first time in years, the Viking king of the Klondike didn't yell, didn't laugh, didn't curse. He just stared at the chest silently, his jaw tightening as he closed the lid. One worker later revealed, "He told us to forget what we saw. Then he locked the whole section down." But the secret was already out. And once the crew started talking, the truth began spreading faster than Tony could shut it down, because what Tony had hidden inside that dredge wasn't just old paperwork. It was evidence of a history that could threaten his entire operation and possibly the legacy he spent a lifetime building. The moment Tony Beets saw what his workers had uncovered, everything about him changed. Normally, he's loud, fiery, and unfiltered, a man who has built his entire Gold Rush identity on raw power and no-nonsense leadership. But on that day, inside the belly of his old dredge, Tony went silent. Not angry, not confused, just quiet. For the crew, that silence was more terrifying than any shouting match. The workers watched Tony carefully as he closed the metal chest, brushing his gloved hands across its rusty surface as if he recognized it, maybe even expected it. One worker later said, "It was like he'd seen a ghost." He stood there for a long moment, staring into the compartment as the dredge creaked and groaned around him. Finally, he exhaled deeply, climbed out, and ordered everyone outside. No cameras, no questions, no discussions. But the crew had already seen too much. Once they were all gathered outside, Tony scanned their faces with the same hardened stare he uses when he's about to fire someone. Except this time, there was something else behind his eyes, something the workers didn't recognize. Worry. Tony rarely shows fear. Yet here he was, visibly rattled. He told the crew, in a low voice, that chest stays where it is. Nobody touches it. Nobody talks about it. When someone asked why, Tony snapped, "Because it's none of your damn business." But the workers knew there was more to it. The chest wasn't full of worthless junk. It held documents tied to illegal mining operations from decades ago, operations that might still hold legal or environmental consequences today. If the wrong people saw those papers, it wouldn't just be Tony's dredge in trouble, it could jeopardize multiple claims, permits, and future mining rights. And Tony understood that he wasn't just protecting history, he was protecting his empire. But what the workers didn't expect was what happened later that night. After everyone left the site, Tony returned to the dredge alone. Security cameras caught him walking into the machine with a flashlight, tools, and a small metal case under his arm. He stayed inside for nearly 2 hours, and no one knows exactly what he did in that time. Some believe he removed certain documents. Others think he sealed the compartment even tighter. What's certain is this: when the workers showed up the next morning, the entire lower section of the dredge was welded shut. Thick steel plates covered the entrance. Fresh bolts lined the seams. Tony didn't even try to hide the fact that he had reinforced it himself. One of the welders said, "It looked like he was burying something alive." But the crew wasn't done talking, not after what they saw. Word began spreading between teams, and soon, people were asking questions the cameras had never asked. Why did Tony fight so hard to keep that dredge running? Why did he spend millions restoring a machine that barely turned a profit? What connection did he have to the dredge's controversial past? And most importantly, was Tony afraid of what the truth might cost him? Even the Beets family noticed the shift. Fans have seen Tony irritated, upset, frustrated, but the weeks after the discovery were different. He became more private, more guarded, and more determined to keep the dredge off limits. It wasn't long before whispers reached the Gold Rush production team. They began digging into the dredge's history themselves, pulling old mining records and archived photographs. And once they did, they realized the workers hadn't even uncovered the most dangerous part of the story. Because the dredge wasn't just tied to illegal mining. It was tied to a past tragedy the public never knew about, and one Tony hoped would stay buried forever. For years, Tony Beets' towering, rusty dredge sat like an abandoned monster on the edge of his claim, silent, decaying, and avoided by almost everyone who worked for him. But according to the workers who finally spoke up, there was a reason Tony never wanted anyone getting too close. The dredge wasn't just old equipment. It was a vault of secrets. The first worker to talk was a mechanic named Roy, who claimed he once climbed inside the dredge during a routine inspection. At first, he expected nothing more than broken metal, mud, and the usual Gold Rush clutter. But instead, he found something surprising. Entire sections of the dredge had been welded shut from the inside. Heavy steel plates, bolts that didn't match the original construction, and compartments that served no mechanical purpose. Something, he said, was hidden there deliberately. Another worker, Anna, revealed that every time someone asked about those strange compartments, Tony would shut the conversation down immediately. He'd say it's nothing, just old junk, she explained. But if it was really nothing, why did he get so angry when we brought it up? The suspicions grew when a third team member admitted that Tony kept the dredge locked far more often than any other equipment. Even though it wasn't in use, no one was allowed to work inside without permission. No one was allowed to explore. and Tony himself rarely approached it unless everyone else was busy somewhere else on the claim. According to the crew, the turning point came when a storm hit the Yukon and lightning struck the power shed, knocking out electricity across the site. As workers scrambled to secure everything, they saw Tony sprinting not to the wash plant, not to the generators, but straight toward the dredge. And he wasn't alone. He carried a set of keys, a toolbox, and a flashlight, disappearing inside the giant structure for nearly an hour. When he finally emerged, he looked shaken, like a man who had just seen something he wasn't ready for anyone else to see. After that night, the rumors spread faster than gold dust in the wind. Some believed Tony was hiding a stash of incredibly rich pay dirt he didn't want the show's producers knowing about. Others whispered he found something historic inside old mining documents, artifacts, or maps to untouched gold-rich ground. But the most startling claim came from a longtime worker who left the crew last year. He insisted that Tony's dredge held something far more valuable than gold, something the old miner had kept secret for decades. And according to him, the truth would change how fans see Tony forever. After the storm, after the whispers, and after the crew's revelations, the old dredge had become more than a machine. It had become a mystery. Every worker who stepped inside swore they felt it, an aura of secrecy, as if the metal itself had memories Tony didn't want anyone to access. It was clear the dredge wasn't just old equipment. Something was inside, something Tony Beets had deliberately hidden, kept locked, and refused to discuss for decades. The breakthrough came when a junior worker, curious and impatient, persuaded a few colleagues to pry open one of the welded compartments. They worked quietly, using crowbars and heavy tools, careful to avoid being noticed. What they uncovered left them speechless. Inside the hidden chamber was a collection of old, sealed crates, some smaller, some larger, coated in layers of grime and dust. At first, they assumed it was tools, spare parts, or just junk Tony had thrown aside over the years. But when they opened the crates, the truth hit them like a ton of bricks. The crates contained stacks of historical mining documents, permits, maps, and ledgers from previous operations that were never publicly recorded. Some contained references to disputed claims and land that was technically off-limits. Old equipment with strange modifications, not just tools, but mechanisms that suggested someone had been experimenting with mining techniques. Long before Tony arrived, bundles of letters and photographs showing prior owners and workers in situations that clearly violated mining regulations. Documents Tony had obviously wanted forgotten. A smaller locked box within the crate, unlike the crates themselves. This was made of heavy steel and contained personal items, ledgers, notes, and records that linked directly to a decades-old legal dispute involving the dredge's original owners. According to the crew, opening the box felt like uncovering a crime scene from another era. Tony had clearly been aware of its contents for years, carefully hiding the evidence that might have caused trouble, legal or otherwise. One worker said, "It wasn't just old history. It was something Tony wanted gone from memory. He didn't just hide it. He built the dredge around it." When the story reached the surface, the crew noticed a change in Tony. He became more guarded, quieter than usual, and occasionally lashed out at even the slightest suggestion of inspecting the dredge. It was as if the dredge itself held power over him, a reminder that no matter how wealthy or famous he became, some secrets were still dangerous. What the workers had found explained years of odd behavior, the relentless maintenance and repairs on a machine that barely turned a profit, Tony's unusual insistence on keeping cameras away from certain sections of the dredge, the extreme security measures surrounding what was otherwise just a piece of mining equipment. But it also raised bigger questions. Was the dredge itself involved in past legal or financial disputes Tony wanted erased? Could the documents inside threaten the claims he currently operates? And most importantly, was Tony hiding something even more shocking than anyone suspected? The crew feared that if the contents were exposed publicly, it could spark a scandal far beyond anything seen on Gold Rush. Some even whispered that the original owners might have left instructions in those crates, instructions that Tony was desperately trying to keep buried. Despite the risks, Tony's actions had one unintended consequence. Curiosity grew. Rumors began to spread across the mining community. Everyone wanted to know what had been hidden inside Tony Beets' legendary dredge. And with each passing day, the tension rose. Because secrets like these rarely stay buried forever. The old dredge, once just a relic of mining history, had transformed into a vault of mystery. A symbol of Tony Beets' complicated past. And a story that would shock anyone who thought they knew the man behind the legend.